when you have the mic, right? An example was this morning when Ray Ann Oakley was getting things ready for Sunday school. And she was setting up some snacks. And there was a snack table, and at one end of the table, she had a great big bowl full of apples. And at the other end of the table, there was a great big bowl of chocolate chip cookies. Well, she put a sign that said, "Oh, buy the apples. By the apples only." She put a sign that said, "Only take one. God is watching." Well, Curtis is down at the other end of the table telling the kids, "Take all the cookies you want. God's watching the apples." Well, I heard from the Merrifields that Kelsey in school, her teacher was teaching them about whales. And the teacher was saying that even though whales are very large, there's no way that a whale could possibly swallow a human being. Well, Kelsey raised her hand and she said, "I went to vacation Bible school and I was with Mr. Biggs. And he told us all about Jonah being swallowed by a whale. In fact, I even went inside the whale." And the teacher said, "That is ridiculous. There is absolutely no way that could ever happen. Whales' throats are too small." Kelsey put her hands on her hips and she said, "Well, when I go to heaven, I'm going to ask Jonah all about it." And the teacher responded, "Well, what if Jonah didn't go to heaven? What if Jonah went to hell?" "Well, I guess you'd have to ask him that." Now, we all know that Pastor Jeff is involved with the youth, and he's developed a reputation in the community of really being effective with the youth. And there was a single mom that she had an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, and she just was having real issues trying to get the kids to mind. So she came to Pastor Jeff, and she said, "Pastor Jeff, I know I don't go to your church, but would you help me out?" And Pastor Jeff, being the great guy he is, says, "Well, yeah." He says, "I'd be more than happy to help you out. But," he said, "I do have one condition." And the mother said, "Well, what's that?" He says, "I want to meet with the children separately." "Oh, no problem, no problem." So they set it up so that the 8-year-old was to come in the morning, and the 12-year-old was to come in the afternoon. So Pastor Jeff gets one of the Sunday school rooms all set up, and he's got a single chair right in the middle of the classroom. And when the little 8-year-old comes in the door, Pastor Jeff is just kind of standing there with his arms crossed like that, standing back quite a ways from the chair, and he just kind of points to the chair. The little boy's eyes get really big, and he goes over and he sits down in the chair, and Pastor Jeff finally says, "Son, do you know where God is?" The little boy's eyes got really big, you know. Pastor Jeff gets a little closer because the boy didn't respond. So Pastor Jeff gets even closer, and his voice gets a little bit louder. He says, "Son, do you know where God is?" The little boy's mouth drops open and his lip starts quivering, you know, and he's still not responding. So Pastor Jeff gets right in his face, you know. And he finally shouts. He said, "Son," he said, "do you know where God is?" And the little boy just screamed, and he ran out the door, and he ran home, and he hid in the closet. His older brother goes looking for him. He opens the closet, and he finds his little brother in the closet, and he says, "What are you doing in the closet?" He says, "Oh, man, are we in trouble this time? God is missing, and they think we took him." Ginger wanted to try to copy her mother being a gourmet cook, you know, so Ginger decided that she was going to invite over Pastor Becky and her husband Ken, and she was going to invite over too Pastor Jeff and Cherith and Cyrus. So she's got quite a big gathering going here, and she's getting things all prepared, you know, for the gourmet meal. And finally they sit around the table and they're getting ready, and finally Ginger looks over at Kenzie, and she says, Kenzie, why don't you say the prayer? And Kenzie said, well, Mom, what do you want me to say? Well, say what you've heard your mom say. Oh, okay. So Kenzie bows her head and she says, Dear Lord, why did I invite so many people to supper? Well, there's also a kind of a double purpose for what I call holy humor, because it really reminds me of a time in my life when, before I met Christ, when I developed a reputation for dirty jokes. And here I was, a college grad, working at a professional CPA firm in Grand Rapids. And the guys at the CPA firm who were Christians developed a nickname for me. And it was Dirty Virg. Because there wasn't a dirty joke I didn't know and that I couldn't tell. And I could embellish them and take that same skill that you have with holy humor and use it for rotten, filthy stuff. And one of the first things the Lord convicted me of when I became a Christian was, He told me that's got to change. So I did. I made an effort to begin to purge that from my life, and it was about 5 years later, I happened to be in front of my dad's store, Larry's store, and there was a person across the street, and possibly her name was Gardner. And she worked at the school system, and her husband worked with me in Grand Rapids, so she knew about me. And she yells right across the street in her loudest voice that she can, Hey, Dirty Virg, how you doing? And I'm just like, oh man, I'll tell you. You know, my heart was really heavy. But then there was a part of me that said, you know, it reminded me of that saying, Lord, I know I'm not what you want me to be yet, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.